Thank you, Cahirlach. Thank you very much, Minister, and you're very welcome to the House. And I very much welcome this bill. We've spoken about it on a number of occasions. The fact is that depending where you happen to be lucky or unlucky enough to be born and into the family that you're born into, you either have a lifetime of opportunity rolled out in front of you, where you have parents, family, networks supporting a life lived to the full, or you can have an influence in your community and in your family in many instances that deny and steal children any sort of a future at all before they're, even able to read and write, if they're even afforded that opportunity. So this idea that there are people who intentionally set out to steal that future from children, that needs to be criminalised. That grooming needs to be criminalised. That direction of, and I like the definition of directs within the bill, that it is to give an order, an instruction, guidance, or make a request of a person to carry out an activity. It covers the whole gamut of how suggestion can be made to children of what will gain approval. I've just come from the AV room where Sporting Liberties are in, making a fantastic presentation about the needs in the area of Dublin 8. And in that area, in 2011, the population was 50,163. And you compare that to all of the populations of other areas, such as, for instance, the sum total of Coolock, Roscrea, Walkinstown, Ballyboden, Castleknock, Finglas West, Virginia, and Newcastle, where you have a population of 47,000. Those areas added up all have 22 GAA pitches. The area of all of Dublin 8 with a 50,000 population has no GAA pitch. They have no facilities. So children are left to go on the streets, to be on the streets, to congregate on the streets, because they have nowhere else to go. And you and I was out with you in the Cherry Orchard Equine Centre, which is fantastic. Both the organisation there and St. Ultan's next door, in that whole campus idea of supporting the community. They work, the youth diversion programme that you have very generously supported, they work very hard for young people to give them a somewhere to go, to give them purpose, to give them leadership, give them mentoring, and have male role models in their lives that invest in them. But the fact is that depending on where you're born, depending on where you grow up, you either have opportunity or you don't. So we need to make sure that the people that would steal that opportunity can be imprisoned. And, our party leader, the Taoiseach, has often said about, that we're for the people who get up early in the morning. And I have constantly said the people who get up early in the morning include the mothers in Cherry Orchard who go and do 3 cleaning jobs in the day so that they can buy the Canada Goose jacket for their child, or they can buy the fancy designer runners so that some drug dealer doesn't do it, in order to induce a child into carrying drugs, holding drugs. And how many times have we come across young people when they were asked to do this, and this is what they get? They don't just get the flash things that they otherwise may never have an opportunity to get. They get status in their community. And it is a necessity that we not just criminalise those who would divert away their future and their opportunity in life, but also that we put in all of those services, like the youth diversion programme, like all the GAA pitches, like all of the other asks. It's very important that we do that. The Citizens' Assembly report, which is quite mammoth, but I've gone through it, and it's 36 recommendations, and a lot of those recommendations are around exactly this sort of thing, that children, we have to criminalise that idea that you would induce a child into criminal activity, but we also need to put in the supports. We need to make sure that wherever you are born, you have an equality of opportunity, equality of actually getting to school, actually getting opportunities, in the likes of St. Ultan's, where they run programmes on getting every child to brush their teeth, because a lot of homes, they may not get that opportunity to be taught those things. their personal grooming, personal care, having personal self-esteem, and getting that in and of themselves and encouraging that in and of themselves, so that they get those opportunities, they feel that self-respect, and they have a greater resilience then for not to be tempted into a status and an inclusion in a gang and in being a somebody in your community when otherwise you may not. So they deserve all of those rights and all of those opportunities. The things that I suppose I would be curious about, or would wonder at committee stage, I'm sure that you will be able to explain and elaborate on for us, are things like, what happens when it's in the family? You know, what happens if that adult is a family member? What is the evidentiary bar going to be for a criminal prosecution? Whose statement is going to have to be taken? Does the child have to give evidence? How are we going to do that when that is somebody that is a family member? And I have no doubt that that has been already well thought through. But I think that we just need to be sure that we have that on the record of the House, that how are we going to ensure that this isn't a symbolic criminal offence on the statute books, but actually it is something that's executable, and that it will actually deliver real people going to see them being successfully prosecuted in the criminal justice system, that we make sure that we do that. So I think that there is a little bit of depending on how that evidentiary bar is going to be reached, it will be important to know whether this is mere empiric or an actual fact executable. You know, the grooming, within that there will be family loyalties, there will be community loyalties. How are we going to deal with that? Is it going to be the say-so of a Garda? I don't see anything in the legislation that would say that. You know, so how is that? Who is going to give evidence, and what sort of supports are we going to put in place for that? There's no question, but the Gardaí are already alive to this as an issue. They already see it. I'm chair of the Dublin 12 Drugs and Alcohol Task Force, and you know, the contributions of the Gardaí in meetings of that are really extraordinary, and I know they're really insightful. They go and they meet young people in the community and are in touch with in touch with what their influences are, who's meeting them, who's talking to them. So having community Garda presence is really, really important, so that you have Gardaí that are accessible to young people, so that you can have that flow of information and hopefully break that cycle that condemns young people at a very young age. I'm also a little bit concerned about the fact that sometimes the person who is coercing here, or the person that's suggesting or leading astray and potentially coming within the definition of grooming under this Act, may themselves be a reasonably young person, maybe, you know, a teenager themselves who have already been led down a path. And so I suppose I'm mindful of the lessons and the recommendations on the Citizens' Assembly, making sure that we don't criminalise people too early and set them on a path where they're going to be in prisons, or they're going to be out of the opportunity of redemption. So I think ensuring that we have diversion programmes, that we have opportunities and other alternatives other than prison in those instances, depending on the age of the perpetrator and the accused, will be very important for us to do that. So I think that we will need clarification on that at committee stage, just to be sure of how this works out as we go through each of the individual offences. The low threshold is right. You know, I think it will be very important that the child doesn't have a liability. You know, we in the Children's Committee, we're due to visit Oireachtas at some point in the next couple of months. And, you know, and I think we don't want children ending up there unless it's absolutely necessary. So ensuring that there is no legal liability on the children, I think, will be very important. At the same time, ensuring that doesn't, it will be important to be reviewing how that operates, to ensure that it's not being exploited by criminal gangs. You know, there are areas where people, and you and I have been in them together, Minister, where people are afraid to go out. They're afraid to take initiative in their communities. They're afraid to do any of these things because just to exist there, they have to turn a blind eye. So this needs to be a completely, I suppose, comprehensive response, of which this is just one small instrument. But I commend you, and naturally, of course, myself and Fine Gael will be supporting the bill. Thank you.